man can get.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. Happy New Year to you. I'm Jenna Wolf. This is Nick Wright. Bart Scott is filling in for Chris Carter today. Boys, it is nice to spend the first of the year with both of you.
We all party, man.
Happy New Year, Mr. Happy New Year, Mr. Nick Wright.
I saw him at the Shake 'em Up Club last night.
To the wee hours of what, 7:30 p.m.?
No, come on. We've been going straight since yesterday.
Straight since yesterday, said none of us. Big show today, kicking off the year right. Eagles could still bring back Carson Wentz. Tom Brady knows how tough the road to the Super Bowl will be, but our very big story this morning, could this be the end of the Triple Bs in Pittsburgh? An always dramatic Steelers locker room took an even more dramatic turn yesterday. According to multiple reports, Antonio Brown got into a heated argument with Ben Roethlisberger earlier in the week. He reportedly threw a ball at him, walked off, skipped multiple practices, and did not return for the rest of the week. Antonio Brown did show up to Heinz Field on Sunday, however, expecting to play, and he was told he would not be. He reportedly left at halftime in frustration. All right, Nick, we'll start with you. What is your reaction to the latest in Pittsburgh now?
This is not typical Steelers drama. This is not an example of what Coach Mangini would talk about saying at different families. This is a big deal. This week was a playoff game for Pittsburgh. I know they needed help to get into the playoffs. One thing they knew, if they lost to Cincinnati, their season was over. That means it was a playoff week for them and a playoff game for them. Antonio Brown is the best player on this football team. And the dust up between he and Ben Roethlisberger, I can understand that. There's a circumstance you could present to me where I would say, hey, I might have thrown the ball at him too, depending on how it went down. And I'm sure Bart can elaborate on that. But not showing up to work the following days, forcing Mike Tomlin's hand to where Mike Tomlin had no choice but to bench the best player on his team in their most important game of the year. That's a really big deal and a really bad look for a player in Antonio Brown who has had a really rough season when it comes to things other than catching footballs and catching touchdowns. Those things he's still been great at. This goes back to in the offseason when he's dealing with a lawsuit about allegedly throwing furniture off a balcony and almost striking a toddler down at a pool condo. Like, it was an incident where he skipped a practice after having a dust up after a September 16th loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, these things can't happen from the best player on your team. And Antonio Brown this offseason needs to figure out what type of NFL player he wants to be and what type of career and where he wants that career to be moving forward.
This was ballsy. I mean, I played with some personalities. Whether you want to go Chris McAllister, Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs. Yep. I've never heard of somebody. Well, one time at band camp, right, with Chris McAllister, he did something, but this ain't the Chris McAllister show. I've never heard of somebody walking away from practice, not showing up during the week, a pivotal week to get into the dance. I mean, I don't understand. This tells me, and you hear all the players saying that's just AB going AB, and I listen to Ryan Clark, and he's talking about, some dust-ups like, hey, that was the wrong guy to give money. He was yelling at Dick LeBeau, who's a legend, who's not only a football legend, but a Pittsburgh Steelers legend. That just tells me that this guy's been out of control for a long time. And how long has Mike Tomlin been having to deal with this? You talk about the 3 Bs. You may be down to only 1 B, because I don't understand how going forward you allow this guy to be a member of your football team. I think already Juju, much like we talked about yesterday with Santonio Holmes and Antonio Brown becoming the #1 receiver, I think now Juju, he got the team MVP. But you need your best players to be the best people. We understand he's a hard worker, but you can't be a diva, not to this extent. And
it's selfish.
It's selfish, and he threw the ball at the wrong person. The one person on that team that he probably couldn't win, through ownership is Ben Roethlisberger, because Ben Roethlisberger is bigger than him, and he didn't understand his place on the totem pole. I don't understand how you come back from this, but you can't move him, because what are you going to get for arguably just the best receiver in the game, but a guy that you just gave a $68 million extension to a couple of years ago.
The problem is you can't move him, even if someone wants to give you great draft compensation for him, and even if you think Juju is the heir apparent, they gave him that extension February of 2017. But more importantly, they restructured it 1 year in. So this is convoluted salary cap stuff, but what people need to know is this. If they trade or cut Antonio Brown,
right,
they have a $21 million cap hit on next year's cap or over the next 2 years cap for Antonio Brown. So it's $21 million of a $200 million cap, about 10%, for him not to be on their football team. I don't know that he's diving into the cap figures, but I think he knows he's pretty untouchable. Mike Tomlin, about 3 years ago, when he was asked about some of Antonio's antics, he almost said incredulously to the media, as written about in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette this morning, "What do you want me to do? Not play him?" And it is an interesting point. Like, what do you do when a player is this good, is consistently this productive? He's 1,400 yards basically every single year. It's tough not to play him. He had to go to this extent to not play him, and even then, the team was covering up for him. Yeah. They were calling this a knee injury up until it got out after the game.
How does the team react to this? How does the rest of your locker room? I mean, I wonder going into Sunday's game how much the whole team actually knew what was going on and how they reacted and how he comes back from this. If he financially can't be moved, how you move on from this and get back on the same page with both Big Ben and the rest of the team.
He's going to have one of those come to Jesus moments and understand. And he can get in front. I mean, the fact that he wasn't even there, when the team were exiting yesterday, he didn't even show up yesterday. The fact that Rooney reached out to him, he didn't return the owner's calls. Yep. I mean, I don't know how you come back from this. I mean, sometimes you got to eat that money, and it's more important for you to have a culture because, how do you empower, Tomlin to be able to discipline everybody when we know that AB has his own set of rules? And, at the end of the day, this thing is if it's only one B instead of three Bs, then it's time to rebuild and start to think about doing something different in Pittsburgh anyway, especially looking at the rest of the division, seeing where the Ravens are and seeing where the Browns are, what the Browns are doing. We could be witnessing the end of the Pittsburgh Steelers on top. We may see more of the early Cowher years as opposed to what we become accustomed to seeing.
And it's tough to rebuild, real quick, tough to rebuild with a quarterback going into year 16. A quarterback that is not one of these cheap young quarterbacks where you can add a ton of talent. And where if you do move Antonio Brown, you get no cap relief from it. But you're in a rough spot, and listen, Tomlin's going to catch a lot of strays on this one, understandably. But the guy he threw the football at is a culture setter as well.
Why? Because he didn't play him?
Well, to run a route.
Well, no. She's asking why Tomlin's going to catch him. No, I think people understand him not playing him. Okay. I think people are going to blame Tomlin that a situation could get to this point. Okay. Now, I don't know how you control a grown man. I don't know how, if Antonio Brown, Tomlin again, a couple years ago when he was asked about Antonio's end zone celebrations and the penalties, he said, I don't know what you want me to do. Yeah. Like, what do you want me to do other than not play the guy? And I'm obviously going to play the guy. But culture is set typically by two people in an organization, if you're fortunate enough to have two of these people in the organization. An established head coach, they have that, and a Hall of Fame quarterback, they have that. Big Ben's never been held accountable, and that predates Tomlin. Yep. That predates Tomlin coming there, whether it was the motorcycle, whether it was the horrifying allegations at the bar, a couple of those, whatever, whether it was continually throwing teammates under the bus,
and coaches
under the bus. Yeah. And I'm curious what Big Ben's going to say about 4.5 hours from now when he does that radio show, because I'm sure he'll sound off on this. You have two guys in that organization that have more power than Antonio Brown. One of them, he only has more power almost in title because all he can do is hurt the team by benching him. Right. The other one acts a fool nearly as much, and not surprisingly, the other one in Big Ben is the one who the ball got thrown at.
And remember the Facebook thing, right? How selfish that was. Intimate setting, an intimate moment where coaches say things that they won't say publicly. He's recording it.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
And also a week ago, we were talking about how this team voted on an MVP, and even though Antonio Brown put up great numbers this year, they voted for Juju Smith-Schuster, which I'm sure he felt, and it's indicative of how this team may AB sees him and sees Ben Roethlisberger.
See, I think that was more. Antonio's won that award, voted on by his teammates prior to this year 4 times in the previous 6. And Juju actually he didn't have the touchdowns, but he had more yards, more catches than AB. I think that was more a slap at Ben Roethlisberger, who hadn't won it once since 2009 and has only won it once ever. That team MVP that the team never votes on the quarterback, who has been for a long time, either the best or the second best player on the team, that's an interesting part of the Steelers as well.
All right, we'll take a break, but it will be interesting to hear if Big Ben does speak today. What he has to say about other things. Probably throw us under the bus just while he's throwing people. Coming up, are the Eagles making a mistake sticking with Nick Foles? Happy New Year's Day, everyone. This is First Things First.